Hi, Mitch Sandbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This is the Security News Update for November 5th, 2023. Note that there will not be a Security News Update next weekend, and there won't be any blog posts on Thursday and Friday of this week. On the alerts department, Cloudflare is having a few problems, although it doesn't appear that the problems are affecting website display of their core service, but it is affecting their dashboard and their API and a bunch of other services. So if you are a Cloudflare customer, this could be impacting you. Next, and this kind of fits in all over the place. I've talked about it several places in the newsletter. The SEC is charging SolarWinds and also their CISO with securities fraud. Now, the important thing to understand here is that they're not being charged with having crappy cybersecurity. That is not a crime. Maybe it should be, but it's not. What they're being charged with is the cover-up. And that's kind of, what a lot of people have discovered, including, Richard Nixon and a bunch of people since then, is that the crime is not the problem, it's the cover-up. So in this particular case, what they're being charged with is lying about having crappy cybersecurity practices and telling people they actually had good cybersecurity practices when they absolutely did not. Even to the point of stupid stuff like they said they required strong passwords when they didn't. I mean, just basic stuff like that. That they had a secure cybersecurity software development framework when they didn't. They said they followed the NIST cybersecurity framework. Well, that's kind of true if you say that complying with you know 5 out of 300 controls is following the framework. I mean, I guess technically it's following the framework, but not really. So, this is kind of a great thing for people to read and understand and consider, that the crime is in the cover up. It often is. In this case, is no different. There's an article in the newsletter from Morrison Forster, the law firm, which is great summary. If you're good at speed reading or skimming, then the indictment is a great thing to read. It's about 70 pages, but I got through it in about 10 or 15 minutes if you're only looking for high points. Definitely something to consider. It also seems that the Justice Department is going after folks. This sort of depends, I think, on what the next administration decides to do. If they don't care about cybersecurity and they're weak on cybercrime, then this will, go by way of the dodo bird. But if the next administration is strong on cybercrime, then this will continue. Next, in the breach department, Okta once again is hit by another breach. This one, it's not been a good year for Okta. This one affected about 5,000 employees. It's another, supply chain breach one more time. In this case, it was a vendor who had their employee health data, Right Way Health, and Right Way apparently was the wrong way and lost the data, lost control of the data. So either, Okta's had a really bad string of luck, or maybe there's something else there. I don't know. But certainly, if you're an Okta customer, I would definitely consider what you're doing and, pushing harder for that. The interesting thing with the SolarWinds breach, or I'm sorry, the SolarWinds lawsuit, not the breach brought by the SEC, is that it really puts the law firms that are representing companies in case of a breach kind of dancing on the edge of a knife, right? Because if your client as a law firm is not telling the truth or has not told the truth, or in the case of a breach is withholding critical information, the law firms will encourage that because they don't want that information to be used against you. On the other hand, the SEC is going to go off and say, you really need to be disclosing that stuff. Talk about the rules now with regard to 8Ks, which are making things, really, really much harder about things. So, we shall see, but it's going to make the law firm job a lot harder for sure. Next, Germany is banning LinkedIn. from ignoring do not track. LinkedIn story is, well, it's not a global standard. You can't force us to use it. Well, obviously the various states and countries disagree with LinkedIn. I mean, the challenge, of course, from LinkedIn's standpoint is they make all the money by stealing your data. And if you're telling them that they can't steal your data, well, that's a problem for them and for their bank account. So, right now it's an interesting challenge. But there's several states inside the United States that require do not track to be complied with. That includes, for example, California and Colorado. But now the Berlin Regional Court, which is one of the more aggressive courts in Germany, is slapping LinkedIn around. And in addition to ignoring do not track, they're also making user profiles visible by default, which the court says is a no-no, and forcing users to accept a license agreement in a language that is not their first language, i.e., the license agreement is in English, not in German. So, we shall see where this goes. LinkedIn vows to appeal it. I don't think the EU courts are going to have much sympathy for LinkedIn, but more power to them for trying. Next, in the legal front, the FTC says Amazon and specifically includes Jeff Bezos in this, intentionally displays what they're calling, what Amazon's calling defective ads to rake in more profits. What they're doing is they're pushing ads into the stream of traffic that you see with an intent of forcing other companies to bid more money to get their ads to appear instead of the junk ads, which Amazon is pushing. The effect of that, and really the sole effect of that, is to increase Amazon's revenue from the ads. And obviously, also, detracts from the user experience because you get all these junk ads. But mostly, what it's doing is improving Amazon's bottom line. And apparently, these idiots, at some point in time, people will figure out, and I don't know when, that when you're doing things that are clearly blatantly against the law, you shouldn't document them in email for everybody to see. But whatever, that's not my department. It's above my pay grade, as they say. Next, in the breaches department, 23andMe, the hackers had originally leaked about 1 million records, mostly of people of Ashkenazi Jewish and also Chinese descent. Not those two combined, but those two separately. Now they published several more million records. The story that 23andMe has been playing for a while now, as well as people reusing passwords, and that's why they're able to do this. When we get to 5 million records, that sounds a bit dicey to me. I don't know, but I'm sure there's a lot of people, including those at the Justice Department, who are going to be looking at that. Next, Dallas County, not the city of Dallas, quote, became aware, unquote, of a cybersecurity incident, i.e. they were hacked, that affected part of their networks. They only admitted that, and this is where the lawyers get in charge of things. They only admitted it because the gang that stole the data outed them on their website, and now at that point they're kind of screwed, and they have to admit that the data was stolen, because otherwise the gang is likely to go prove that the data is stolen by publishing it, and that's probably not what they wanted. So stay tuned on that one. Next, Ace Hardware. And for those of you who are not aware, Ace is a cooperative. They're owned by the stores. So it's really just a marketing brand and a warehouse system. They were hit by a cyber attack about a week ago. It took many of their key systems offline. In particular, it means that stores can't order, customers can't order, and the warehouses can't pick orders and or deliver. So this is a real big problem for them. Interestingly, they said, there's like 300 servers and 1,000 workstations that were encrypted. They say that over half of those are already, and this was several days ago, already rebuilt and in QA at this point. So if that turns out to be the case, this may be a real role model for how to do things right, how to do business continuity disaster recovery right, because boy, that's pretty quick. Next, about 70 cities in Germany were hit by ransomware. One more time, it was supply chain. Who would have guessed? Yeah, supply chain. So it was their IT vendor that was hit. All these little towns and cities used the same IT vendor. Not a big surprise there, and they're all down. And each one of these cities is doing different things, but fundamentally they're kind of screwed and trying to figure out what to do. But obviously none of them were adequately prepared because we got the problem here. And next, back here in the United States, Mr. Cooper, who is a large mortgage lender and mortgage servicer, became aware of a cybersecurity incident and locked down their systems to keep your data safe. Now, you got to kind of parse that statement. They became aware of a cybersecurity incident, i.e., in other words, they found that they were hacked or they got hit by a ransomware attack. But that doesn't sound anywhere as good. They locked down their systems. That means they turned them off. And they did that to keep your data safe. Well, to keep the data safe, the smart way to do that would have been to keep the bad guys out, not to turn the computers off. But anyway, that's the spin doctors doing their spin doctoring thing, and we're never going to get past that. But TechCrunch says it's not clear when they'll bring their systems back online, or even if the company has the ability to determine what customer data was stolen. We're going to have to stay tuned on that one. I'm sure it's going to be months. Mr. Cooper, which was formerly NationStar, and before that it was Syntex Homes, and before that Nova, it has a bit of a challenging history, which would really be kind of polite. They did file the legally required 8K on time, which is 4 business days. It's a really crappy 8K, and I think the SEC is going to need to come down on these companies and really whack them if they really want the 8K to have something useful in it. Now, I mean, even a really crappy 8K is still useful because it at least alerts investors that these guys have a problem. So from that perspective, the 8K is useful, but it's not as useful as if it actually had some useful content in it. Basically all it said is, yeah, we got hacked. We're looking at it. So we shall see what the SEC does, but I'm assuming that they're going to go off and provide, shall we say, guidance to these guys. And guidance can come in the form of analysts could downgrade the stock, saying, gee, these guys can't even produce a decent 8K. They're obviously a high security risk, lower valuation. That would probably be the best thing because that would really have a really impactful factor on these guys, right? If all of a sudden your valuation goes down because the analysts say you're a crappy cybersecurity risk, that will get people's attention. Next, a lot of startups are of the move fast and break things model, which I understand, right? Because if you're trying to build a product and you have a limited amount of money, then that's what you're going to go do because after all, you have a limited amount of money and a limited amount of time. But I think people need to understand the different risks that are associated with open source software and what your responsibility and your liabilities are. If you're using open source software and this does not make sense to you, then you should probably contact us because you need to really have your arms around this thing. It doesn't mean you shouldn't use open source software. I mean, you should understand what the risks are. Next, 48 companies, I believe, countries gathered at the White House this week to discuss ransomware. And a bunch of them, not all of them, a bunch of them agreed not to pay hackers ransom demands. Now, this only applies to those governments, not the companies inside those countries. But still, right, the kind of the Willie Sutton model, if less people are willing to pay the ransom, then that makes ransomware less attractive. And ultimately, that will hopefully cause people to go off and decide this is not a great business. We need to find a different business model. Next, one researcher has claimed to crack the RSA 2048-bit encryption algorithm with quantum computing, although not exactly sure what the quantum computing. He works for or owns or is the founder of a quantum computing company. A lot of researchers are skeptical about all this, but if it turns out that he's right and he's not just making this stuff up, this really escalates the crypto war. So if you understand, right, the bad guys and the good guys, us and everybody else, have been collecting encrypted traffic for years now, with the understanding that at some point in time we'll be able to reverse engineer the crypto and look at that. Now, some of it is going to be not very useful. Its usefulness will have timed out, but other stuff will still be useful. And as a result of that, the government is moving madly to put quantum proof or quantum resistant crypto in place, within 5 years. If it turns out that this guy is right and he's not BSing us, everybody figured, including me, that we had about 5 years before this was a problem. If it turns out he's even close to right, that timeline just escalated dramatically. And the assumption that anything that you've sent that's encrypted, that you've sent in the last couple of years is safe, would be naive. If that makes you nervous, then you also should contact us. And in the News Bites section, Meta has launched a paid option in the European Union to deal with hundreds of millions of dollars of fines. They have been fined for stealing your data. This is a good thing, but the thing will be interesting is to see how many people are willing to pay 10 euros a month for ad-free content. And actually it's 13 euros a month if you're going to do it on your phone, because you have to give Apple something, and Meta, of course, is not at all interested in cutting into their profits by giving Apple their 30%. The next, Gen Zers, interestingly enough, appear to be more vulnerable to cybercrime than their grandparents, which is embarrassing. Likely, this does not mean that they are less cyber aware. What it likely means is that they are on their devices way more than their grandparents are, but apparently the numbers are like 3 times more likely to be hacked than their grandparents. There was a Senate hearing this week on new national cyber director after Chris Inglis retired. That seems to have gone very well. So hopefully that'll be smooth sailing. Given all the cyber crap that's going on right now, having a national cyber director would probably be pretty useful. Is your disaster response plan as good as Ace Hardware? If what they say is true, it's likely they're going to be back up in about a week after a major cyber attack. I don't know whether you could do that. If you can, bully to you. If you can't, and you'd like to be, again, reach out to us. And lastly, there's a probe that was done on school surveillance software. That's the software that schools put on their computers to make sure that kids are not going to bad places and doing bad things and cheating and whatever else. Turns out this absolutely disproportionately affects lower income folks, because they're the ones who are forced to use school provided devices, whereas middle income and upper income kids, they just use their own computers until the schools go to hell, because obviously the schools can't install their software on personally owned devices, even though they might like to. But clearly this is a huge surveillance empire. It's not clear what they're doing with all this data, but it's certainly under the microscope at this point. And if your kid uses a school provided computer, you might want to look into that. With that, until next time, thanks for listening and stay safe. If we can help, please reach out to us. Take care.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.